Welcome to the Awesome Black Dad Show, where our goal is to educate, inspire, and encourage dads to become the best version of themselves. Really excited about today's episode. Got another a young lady from high school. We went to high school with, and that was mentioned in a previous episode. And I did my best to try to exclude her name from that episode. But I guess I failed miserably at that. From an audio perspective, I did beep her name out, but from the video, you could clearly, if you were, you did a lip reading 101, you could probably tell what Linton was saying at that particular point in time. But to my, I was happy that she reached out and decided to say, everybody knows that's me, don't you? And I was like, look, I'm sorry. We talking through Facebook Messenger. And I'm like, I'm sorry. You know what? Here's my phone number. Call me. Let's talk. I don't even want to do this through text, no messenger or nothing. I know you well enough. We could talk on the phone. So she called and we had a very interesting conversation. And she said that, she felt like, the things that were said, they didn't feel or appear to be inappropriate. She appreciated the conversation, but she wanted an opportunity to be able to provide some context to that conversation, right? Felt like it was just one-sided. It was Linton's perspective. And she wanted to provide some context to it. And I was like, absolutely. You can come on and provide that context. So I'd like to welcome to the show, Robbie Hardges. Thank you for joining. How you doing today?
Man, I'm great. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you guys having me on. And let me just say, the context I want to provide is not to rationalize or, I guess, clear my name or anything, because there's a bigger story at play. And us all being from Chicago, I'm sure that we all understand that. And I just want to give Dad some insight on how those things can happen.
No, absolutely. I'm looking forward to that perspective, right? So before we actually get into that, I want to go back and play the clip that sparked the interest for this particular show. So here you go.
When I was younger, it was the dope boy who took the girl. That was my age. Yeah. I remember I used to be sick when I would come out of St. Mel. Yep. And Robbie. Okay, it used to be guys in Malibus that can pull up and talk to Robbie, because I used to like Robbie. Okay, and I was like, here the dope boys, they can come in with their Malibus, 30 years old, and take our girls. But that motivated me to be something. Okay, that was my reality.
Hallelujah.
That was his reality. And it does appear that to Jarrell's point last week, it does appear that Robbie was saving lives, right? We didn't know that in high school, you also had you had a doctorate, and, you were a doctor, not doctorate, but you were saving lives. You was a nurse in high school and saving lives at that point. So I really just want to kind of we can get right into it. So when you heard that and you recognized that, beyond my, the beeps, what kind of started going through your mind? Like, what was your perspective? What is the thing that triggered you, and what were you feeling at that time?
Well, of course, because it's Linton, it was funny at first. But it was true. Like, there were grown men, and they weren't 30. Right. But there were grown men, 21, 22, 23, that targeted high school girls. At that age, of course, you're a kid. You're 17, but you're a kid. So you don't really understand that that's really what's happening. And you just looking at it as, oh, it's attention. Like, you getting attention from older guys and they got a little bit of money, or, like, we can go get some Cheesecake Factory or something like that, because the guys who you in school with, they ain't on dating like that. You date at the basketball game and y'all might go to home run in afterwards. But it was it's flattering when you're that age. And when I heard it, it was one of those things, like, if you can't say amen, say ouch. So it's just like, ooh, that was a part of my adolescence and young adulthood that looking back, no, I'm not proud of it. But there were circumstances and things that happened where, because the conversation was about R. Kelly and how all of us knew that that's what he was doing. So in our culture in Chicago, for some people, that's normal. It's normalized to some aspect. If a grown man can come to a school and feel like, oh, it's cool if I holler at these girls, there's some level of comfort there, right? So it's normalized in his culture. So I used to pick apart, like, why is it normalized? And it took my middle sisters from Tulsa, Oklahoma. We didn't grow up together. So when she moved here, she was like, these grown, can we cuss on here? No.
Yeah. Yep, you can. You
She's
good.
like, these grown ass niggas is up here picking up kids. Mm-hmm. And I was just kind of like, she was like, y'all think it's normal. And I was like, well, yeah, I guess it's wrong, but it is normal. And I had to start to figure out, why is this normal? And we grow up fast here. We grow up fast in Chicago. When I went away to school, I went to Clark in Atlanta, and you start to meet people from other cities and other backgrounds, and kids in Chicago grow up fast. They do. And I think that was part of what made it normal, what made it feel like it was okay for these situations to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's we do grow up fast, just because the city moves fast. It's a big city. I think any big city, the same is probably true for like the New Yorks and Californias, right? It just kind of, it moves. And things just, and the people in those areas just move with that pace, right? Mm-hmm. But I think, yeah, it's definitely culturally, when we look back and you talk about the R. Kelly and you look at the documentaries, we all knew, but it was just this thing where it just, I think from a perspective, that's all we've ever known, right? And it's not until, so if you grew up in an environment where your breakfast is grits with sugar, right? And that's all you eat. And that is all you know. You don't know anything different. So that becomes your normal, that becomes your habitat. That's the environment in which you grow up. But then you go down south or something like that, and you get introduced to grits without sugar. And they look at you and you ask, like, where's the sugar? And they, what you need sugar for? Right. And so it's just like, and so it's just the part in our culture, in our communities, right? And that's the only thing I can speak. I don't know what happens in anybody else's community, right? But it just felt like that thing. And I don't want to say it was okay, because even as a kid growing up and even in high school, it was like we knew that the dudes that would pull up in cars that were older than us had a better chance at the prettier girls at that time than we did, right? And so I didn't think that it was cool. I just understood that was the way things were, right? And I think that nobody ever stepped in and said, nah, this ain't cool. I mean, when you look at what happened with R. Kelly, it was like there were a number of adults around him that allowed that to happen. And so I would have to agree that it was normalized, unfortunately. And then now that we are adults and we're presented with it, it is like, dang, what were we thinking? What were we doing? Man. Right?
I want to ask a question, Robbie. You said people are, growing up fast here. By growing up fast, can you elaborate on that, please?
Well, I think because we just run into a lot of adult situations that a typical teenager should not have to make a decision in. Like, one of the biggest things that stands out to me about Chicago and other cities, especially when you're talking about high school kids, and you guys play ball, so I know you guys know this. You have to be concerned about your own safety leaving school. Mm-hmm. Like, we knew the kids at the school down the street, I ain't gonna say no names because I don't want to hurt nobody's feelings, but we know that was a problem for us. That's why we couldn't wear gym shoes no more. Mm-hmm. Because that was Mr. Adams' way of trying to keep his kids protected. And that's something kids should not have to deal with. Like, having to offend to make sure your physical safety is paramount. Like that should still be something that your parents worry about. The fact that kids walk and forth to school, back and forth to school, catching public transportation, that puts you in direct contact, with all of the ills of the world. Like at 17, I shouldn't have known what it looked like somebody serving packs on the corner, but I did.
Right.
You see, kids in other places don't know stuff like this. Like, when you're talking about not just rural America, like, the Raleigh, North Carolinas, the Charlotte, North Carolinas, and Cobb County, Georgia, these are still large cities, but because these towns and these places are able to bus their kids back and forth to school, it offers some type of protection. Like I knew at 14, 15, if somebody walking from car to car on the train, he looking to rob somebody. So I need to either get off or take my stuff off and put it somewhere. This is not things that children need to be aware of. It is what it is, but that's because you're still operating in the mind of a child on some levels. So when you start being confronted with the new shiny things, so like guys who are willing to spend money, you can get your hair done, or you want some Jordans. I was never no Jordan girl personally, but I'm just saying, right. Like when you have those things that are that you're confronted with, now you have to make these decisions. And I think a lot of parents didn't even consider that as something that their kids would have to face as a decision. I mean, my dad, so I'll give you a little background about myself. My mother passed when I was 10. I grew up with my father from the time I was in 8th grade forward. So there was a big generation gap. My father had me at 50. My father's from Mississippi. Mm-hmm. So he's a very stoic man. Mm-hmm. And back then, men didn't raise their daughters. They doted on their daughters, and the mothers raised their daughters. And my father did the best he could with what he had, but emotionally, he was not available. So he would tell me not to cry. If I, came back with a snappy comment, he would say things like, "Don't be such a Black woman." I mean, he's, now we have a different perspective because, things change and but we all parent out of our own trauma, right? So sure, he was just doing what he thought to be right, but he wasn't paying the attention to me that I needed. He gave me everything I needed. He made sure I had a good education. I was safe. I had clothes on my back. I grew up on a nice block. I lived in Maywood. Mm-hmm. And when I told him I didn't want to go to Proviso East. So he's like, either you go to school with me at Farragut or you can go to Providence St. Mel. So I chose St. Mel. Mm-hmm. And I'm so happy that I did, but
yeah, because you got to meet us, right? That's a
right. And people who don't know it, like St. Mel community is just like, man, it's thick, it's tight.
Yeah, small but tight.
We all love each other. Like even if you graduated from 1980 something, you a Knight? Oh, okay, you went to St. Mel. Oh, okay. It's a different type of camaraderie that we have with one another, and I'm happy I went there, but my dad wasn't there for me emotionally. So when I started receiving attention from different sources that I thought was positive attention, I made bad choices.
Whew. I mean, so there's a ton that I want to unpack here, right? So I just want to let's back up a little bit, right? So when you said, and I'm glad you brought up to the context, right? So your dad was older, he grew up in Mississippi, so that culture is different,
right?
And so if you can remember back when, because it kind of struck me when you said that your dad said, when you would come back with a snappy comment, "Don't be such a Black woman." What did that make you feel? Can you remember what that made you feel like at whatever age you were being told that?
I think I felt like, well, dang, I can't say what I want to say, but I kind of understood sometimes you just need to be quiet. Not everything deserves a response, but some things do deserve a response. Right. And for him to make such a blanket statement always made me second guess before I said anything in response to something, whether I knew it was right or I thought it wasn't right. So when you start to second guess, then you just kind of become complacent with it. Like, oh, okay, well, I don't want to be perceived as being difficult or angry or resistant. So sometimes you just kind of deal with things. And I struggled with that for a long time, not speaking out on things that I knew weren't right, whether it was for me or someone else, because I was afraid of how my response would be received.
So it kind of planted a seed for you in terms of like what you, as a Black woman, like how Black women are perceived in the world, not by people that don't look like them, but also by people that look like them, what that perception is. And that's interesting, right? I don't have daughters. I'm just like in my mind going through it. I don't know if Real has any any perspective on that, like how he approaches certain things when it comes to, raising his daughter at this particular point in time. But I think that's interesting. And the fact that you said that we as parents all kind of parent from our trauma, right? Which which is true. And I try to be mindful of it a ton. One of the other things that I wanted to ask when we talk about this culturally, and we talk about it from a perspective of the male perspective, right? So we know culturally as men growing up and seeing, the whole, guys pulling up in Malibus and having a better opportunity at the Robbies of the world, as opposed to us, right? We just accepted that, right? And it was we didn't necessarily talk bad or anything about it. We just accepted that to be a fact. What was the perspective of the girls that were your age, right? And knowing that that's what you were doing, how were the people or the women, the girls at that time in your circle, like how did they feel about that? What were you talking about?
I think it was mixed. So it depended on kind of where they were coming from. Some girls probably admired it. Some probably were scared of it, or apprehensive of it. But that's tough to say. Like, it was kind of like not spoken about a lot.
So it's the same on the girl side. Like the guys really didn't speak about it. The girls were like,
right. And let me say this too. We knew that. Well, I knew that. Okay, this isn't like I went to prom with Linton. I wasn't bringing no 30-year-old ass nigga to prom. Like I wasn't bringing no grown man to prom. No.
Which is news to me. I don't know if Real. Did you know that? Did you know that Robbie went to prom with Linton?
That's breaking news.
Right, that's breaking news.
You didn't know that, and I wish I could dig out a picture. I have some somewhere. Yeah, Linton and I went to prom together, and it was very like me and Linton was always cool. It was like, hey, we would joke in class and have. I love to laugh. So between him and Chauncey, like they would literally have me in tears in every class. So it wasn't. It was like, oh, you going to prom? I'm like, yeah, because I was all prepared to go by myself. Like, I wasn't going to miss out on my prom because of a date. Like, that's not how our school was. Like, that wasn't our reality, the stuff you see in movies. So I was going to go. Like, I already had my dress and everything. He's like, well, you want to go together? I'm like, all right, cool. Yeah. We'll go to prom together. Like, and now it's not somebody from another school, so I don't have to spend all night making sure you feel comfortable. I can actually enjoy myself.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting too, though, that from a mind state perspective, that you were thinking as a part of prom, one, that you were like, I'm not bringing no 30-year-old dude to prom, somebody outside of this situation, and still two, like you were still thinking about where you were because you wanted to go to prom, right? Because otherwise, if you were dating these guys that were older and you were getting exposure to things that were outside of a high school kind of the high schooler's ability, like. You would think that like most people would think like prom is beneath me. Like I'm going to at this time. I don't know what restaurants would probably beyond Home Run Inn at this point, but whatever the girls were seeing, right? Cheesecake Factory or stuff like y'all going to prom. I'm going to Cheesecake Factory. So Right. So, it's still interesting. It goes back to the point that like you were still a child being exposed to adult things, right? And you wanted to still be kind of the child. You wanted to operate in that environment, which I think is still really, really powerful, especially for us as parents, right? And so it's interesting.
And a lot of the dating with these guys, it really started to be out of convenience. Like, okay, I'm gonna get my friend to drop me off at the mall. I'll meet y'all up there. Cause I would still go hang out with friends from school and we'll go to the show together. Or like I still was at every game, even when I wasn't a cheerleader anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like so it started to become a means to an end. Like, okay, well, because I got my prom dress from Barbara Bates. My prom dress was $700. I always had expensive taste.
Yeah,
So,
that's pretty expensive. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, that's. Yeah, I don't even want to go down that path. That's $700.
Yeah, I had my prom dress
was
custom made. I was like, I'm Barbara Bates making my dress. But that's because of the exposure to the older dope boys, right? So because they was getting jackets made and you're like, oh, that's sharp. Like I had a lot of exposure, and I worked down on Michigan Avenue in high school. I worked at Nike Town. So I got to see a lot of stuff that normally you don't see till you graduating from college and starting to work. So yeah, I always had really expensive tastes. It's really bad.
Yeah.
To say. I mean,
Yeah, not a chance. not a chance.
But those are like, so those things, like that's what I felt like they had to offer, because I knew in the back of my mind you were trying to use me anyway. Like I never slept with old men when I was a kid. Like that wasn't.
Yeah.
To me, that would have been gross. It would have been like, but it was just a means to an end with them, because they want to ride around with a cute girl in their car, pretty much. Like they trying to floss. We got to go bend blocks and all this stuff. Okay, so that's what you're doing. All right then. So let me get $300 so I can pay this deposit on my dress.
Now, Robbie, let me ask you this: how much of that activity was came from a point of wanting to show off the attention that you were getting? In other words, like all the other girls, competition wise. You know what I mean? Course. Like, look, girl, look what I'm doing.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a level of cattiness to it. Like, oh, look what I got. Like, oh, that's what you're doing? Oh, okay, that's cool, but
I got a $700 prom dress.
Right. I mean, absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But like at the same point, I knew that wasn't my circle. So at the same time, it still was kind of embarrassing to bring it up. Like going into the public aid office with a $10,000 purse. Like you just kind of like read the room. That's not who you dealing with, right? So it was still kind of like, oh, well, I ain't really gonna talk about it like that. But I'm happy with it. So that's just what it is. But yeah, definitely there is some level of competition in it. Absolutely. I agree.
So what I also want to now, want to go back to the fact of, the whole emotional thing, right? When you said that your dad really didn't tap into, you emotionally. Can you expand on that? Like what that really means? Because a lot of times, just in our circle, we talk about like how we're raising, the differences between raising boys and girls. Right. And so there's always a dynamic there. So I want to know more about like what your perspective is and what that was.
My father had, as any parent does, right, has dreams and aspirations for their child. But sometimes who your child is does not align with what those aspirations you may have for them. And I think that's what my father and I suffered from. My father, and I love my dad. My dad is still living. He's 90 years old. And our relationship is interesting because when my mom was living, I was into art. I drew. I had received a scholarship at the Art Institute, the School of the Art Institute downtown for a full summer of classes. And I was very, very into my art. My father is narcoleptic. he wanted to go to medical school. He went to the Marines because he wanted to be a doctor. Well, back then, they didn't know what narcolepsy was. And he was denied those chances because of his condition. He realized early, my father was also an educator. He was the athletic director at Farragut High School. He realized early that I was smart and that I had a photographic memory. So I'm very strong visually, but when it comes to science, math, things like that, it's not my strong point. I don't do well with very tedious work. I don't do well with very routine, methodical work. It's just not my strength. Not saying it couldn't be, but that's just not where my heart lied. And I remember when I was like 12, I told him I wanted to be a hairstylist. And he told me, that's common. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He was like, well, no, you're not going to do that, because that's what Black women did when they didn't have any other opportunities.
Wait, this is he said that, or is that what you gleaned? Okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely what he said.
Okay.
That's what Black women did when they didn't have any other opportunities. They became hairstylists or secretaries. So I was like, okay, well, whatever. Went away to college, wasted a bunch of money. And when I was 24 and I was able to get financial aid on my own, I went to hair school, and I didn't tell him until a week before I graduated. So to add to all of that, he never gave the energy into who I was. He always fought me on everything that I wanted to do. That was in my heart to do. But I guess my personality and my intuition was strong enough that it just kind of overcame it. And I was never the person to just kind of go along with because that's what you wanted me to do. And, I did it for a minute, and I was just like, I'm not happy doing this. And, now I've been doing hair for 16 years and have made a living off of it and haven't had to ask him for anything. So now it's not, but I know he still has some level of disappointment because he probably felt that intellectually I was greater than that.
And so have you ever had that conversation with him where he felt like, where he said, because he seems like a very outspoken man, right? So he doesn't seem like he holds any punches even with his daughter. So did he, once you told him like, yeah, I'm graduating from hair school, what
we
was
never had that conversation. He came to my graduation.
Okay.
But, we never had that conversation. We have a lot of things that are unsaid.
Okay.
And I don't know, like if it's good, if it's bad, I don't know how some of that stuff would come up. But
Right.
I just felt like he was never really supportive about who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And he would also often pacify, like, oh, okay, well, I'll just take care of it. I'll pay for this, and then, you just go ahead and do it. Or there wasn't a lot of involvement, even though we were still in the same household.
So that being said, Robbie, would you, because we're speaking to the fathers with daughters today, would you say that fathers with daughters needed to be, or just from what you had just said, your father could have been, and this is a question, do you think your father could have been supportive by literally saying, if you said you wanted to do hair, he'd just jump on and say, hey, okay, cool, what you need, look here, or just support you in any kind of way, kind of just, instead of just like, nah, blowing it off, you know what I mean?
Right. I think,
so
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think if he would have, at 18, okay, well, you want to go to hair school? Let's try out hair school. If that's what you want to do, let's dig a little deeper, instead of, because a lot of this stuff in this industry, I had to learn trial and error. And if maybe I would have had an adult around who could have offered a little bit more guidance when it came to working in the industry, and I would have maybe found a mentor, or he would have pressed me to find a mentor, and he would have made me do a little bit more homework on it, then I feel like I could have maybe been a little bit more successful earlier, or I may have found something else that I would have wanted to do more than that. He never really talked to me about what I wanted to do, be as far as a career. Now, he did always tell me that this camera is, sorry, y'all.
Yep, you're good right
okay,
there.
we go.
Yep.
He did always tell me that, you spend so much of your life at work, that you want to make sure that you love what you do. And the fact that he was an educator was really huge to me. And I think him and my mother were both teachers. I definitely have inclination to teach. I think pretty clearly, so I can convey thoughts clearly to others, and I explain things well, written or spoken. So that definitely made a huge impact on me. But I felt like if he would have listened more, if I wasn't so because I became very apprehensive of sharing how I felt with him about certain things because of the constant shooting it down.
Right.
You now you don't really want to tell anybody anything, and you just kind of keep it to yourself. I think one, we would have had a better relationship, and two, that he could have offered me more guidance. Like, I just found out literally this past Saturday that his mother was a hairstylist. He never told me that. He never told me that. My second cousin told me that. And I was like, what?
Right. No, I mean, it hits home again. I don't have daughters. I don't know. Real. Like, is this stuff kind of hitting home to you? Like, I mean, it's hit me, and I have daughters.
A lot of it. My daughter, man, she has a lot of. She's very strong-willed, just as I was or am. So a lot of things that she would suggest, if I say the slightest, yeah, but she feels it's a no.
Yep.
And all I'm trying to do is just get her to think deeper. You know what I mean? So she went into a shell after a while. It was like she wasn't telling me or my wife, her feelings or thoughts or want to do anything. But we'll hear from others that, she said we gonna say no, and we strict and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But we all had a conversation, because what she was taking as, okay, I hear what you're saying, but dig a little deeper. You know what I mean? Just so you have a well thought out plan, so you can see the whole the big picture. She took that as no. So that's what I dealt with that. My one daughter, and she gave me all these grades, man. So every single strand, all that one girl. But I say this, man. I always say this, the girls are way smarter than guys. Like, I'm not saying the sons are dumb, but they right there. They all move.
Yeah, I think we just built. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, man. I mean, and Robbie, let me just say this about Robbie before I forget. There are two things I remember about Robbie in high school, right? And they both got to do with chili, right? She had the biggest mouth, the loudest voice on this side of earth.
That is a fact.
Ever.
That is a fact.
Ever. The bullhorns. I mean, before we started, right before tip off, she started yelling and
the Rocky. Oh, yeah, don't get me started.
And the second was her other thing, man. Her stomp was stupid. Like,
yeah,
she could stomp a hole in concrete, man. That's how we knew. We knew that certain girls, because of their stomp, how hard it was, we knew that at one point in their life, they had roaches. we knew. We just knew. The girls that didn't have roaches, they ain't hard.
There was a short period where we did have roaches.
Oh God. Leave it to real. Leave it to real. Yep. Yeah. So you're gonna bring this back full circle, I hope. Where are we going with this one, real?
Nowhere. I just want to say that. But she's right. As far as a female, what I've learned is that you have, even with my wife, I have to be supportive, not just saying yes, man, yes, man, yes, man, yes. It's more supportive of the idea and the thought. You know what I mean? And get behind the idea or the feeling, and that support, I believe, is develop it more. So if we get behind it and let her, she give me an idea, and I say, okay, let's develop it more instead of, I want you to think about this, trying to switch her how she feels or what she thinks. I think that development of that thought and development of that feeling is important when it comes to female.
Yeah. Go ahead, Robbie. Go ahead.
We need more definitely support, and because we're nurturers, that's what we expect back, right? Men or males, period, you guys fix, you guys solve problems. You are there to be practical and pragmatic and be like, okay, this is boom, boom, boom. That's why, the relationships work well. We're on the more emotional end of the spectrum, and I'm not making a blanket statement. I don't want to offend anybody. But it's because there's every exception to the rule. Like, for instance, in my marriage, my husband was raised by his mother and he has 2 sisters. I was raised by my dad. So some things, like, I'm the handy one in the house. And he's an electronics guy, but like, I'm the one that's going to drill the holes and put the level up and get the measuring tape out, because those are things that I learned from my father. And I try to still be practical in situations because I always have Leon in the back of my head. That's my dad, just not to be too emotional. And it is true that when emotion is high, intellect is low. So that men offer a balance in that. But when you're a woman and you hear a but from a man in your life that's important to you, it's a big old but. It's just like, it's like they stomping on your dream almost, kind of. Right. So verbiage becomes very important, and how you play things out. Like, I'm very concerned with the emotional health of my children. I want my son to be able to talk to me about anything. I want my son to be able to feel like he can go to his dad about anything, because once we shut that door to communication, once he gets 17, 18, God only knows what's going to be happening in his life. And I want to be able to not always be a guiding hand, but just at least I want to know what's going on. So I can, if he asks, I can offer some perspective, but, hold on, my telephone holder going crazy. But if he doesn't ask, I can know, okay, well, why are you feeling like this? I know, I kind of have an idea of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I hear that, and what I'm really trying to listen to and hear is what we as fathers really need to tap on or tap into. And I would imagine that's it's not just more important. It's really important for the girls, but I imagine it's also important for the boys too, right? And I think that's the point you were trying to make. Is that there is a lack of emotion when it comes to guys, just based on the way we are reared, right? And the way that we are raised. We're told that, crying is a sign of weakness, and and all of these things. And then you even grow up and you try to get with women, and you find the woman that you really like. And once you make yourself vulnerable to a point to where it's like you're even open to crying or even sharing your feelings in a way that's different from like that masculine mentality, right? It gets thrown back in your face. So it just makes it that much harder. But when it comes to raising girls, which eventually become black women in our society, it's like they become so callous. right? Then to some degree, that's kind of how, and whether or not you resented your father because of how, the emotional disconnect that you had and how that affected some of the decisions that you made. Just really trying to think through how we as fathers begin to tap into that when it comes to our kids. You know what I'm saying?
Listen, just listen. Like, don't hear them, but listen, and give yourself some time to process it. Like, even if you don't offer them some type of answer at that minute, as a parent, you can say, well, you know what? I need some time to think about this, and I'll let you know. And just really take the time to process it. And when you're processing that information, also think about who your daughter is. Who is your daughter? Like, in what aspects you can trust her, what her strengths are, what her weaknesses are, what her interests are, and every dynamic thing that makes that kid up, everything that makes up that young lady. Take that into consideration as you process the information that child has presented you with, and then talk it out. But don't offer that well, but right away. Just say, hey, because anytime you get ready to say that but, I would say, hey, sweetheart, let me think about it. Dad needs to think about it for a minute, okay? Because that's we can okay, that gives you a little bit of hope. And then now you can formulate questions, because how many times have you made a decision about something that your kid has asked you, and then a day or two later, then you start kind of like second guessing it, or now you have other questions, right, and things like that. So give yourself the time to let it process for a second. And then you guys can talk it out. Hey, well, why do you think this is a good idea? Get their perspective on it. My perspective was never questioned. Like, my father never asked me, like, well, what do you think? Well, how do you think this is going to work? Or do you think this is a good idea for you? Why? Explain to me why, and what would your next steps be? I think that's the best thing you can do. Like, women, we just want to be listened to. We want to be, and know that we're heard. Like, just know that we're heard, instead of just giving some type of answer off of the cuff, either, just to get out of it, or right, let it be done with.
Yeah, no, I mean it's tough. I mean, I go through that with my boys, right? I think as a parent, you feel compelled to really want to have an answer, and to some degree, you feel like because you've been through something similar. And we've had this conversation before, and I had this conversation with Rel before. It's like I'm really mindful of how I project my trauma onto my kids, right? Or the things that I felt I struggled with in school, or whatever that was, whatever it's struggle. Now I'm like the leading expert on that thing. And I have to remember that even though that they're my kids, they are not me, right? Yep. They're basically a gift to me. God gave them to me to be raised to be who they're going to be in this world. So back to even when Rel was saying you were stumping really loud, our kids, the kids we bring into this world, have their own stump, right? I might stump. I can't make him stump the way that I've stumped. I can be there to provide him some guidance on that. But at the end of the day, I have to be able to support him in any way to be the best that he can be, right? And that's hard to do immediately, right? So because our kids also are mirrors of us, and so they do things, and it's like, wait a minute, it is so clear, like you can't blame it on anybody else. You're just like, that is me. And you need to stop it right now. Like, yep. You know what I'm saying? You need to cut it out. Like, so it's really kind of molding and being mindful of that. And with girls, I imagine that it can send them down a really dark path. And one of the questions I wanted to ask is that at what point do you feel like, and maybe I'm wrong about this, so correct me, that you forgiving your dad, right? And maybe you've always done that. You just made your decisions based on who you are. But you did say earlier that some of the decisions you made, the way your dad treated you kind of made you make some bad decisions. At what point in your life did you say, that was my dad, now it's me, I have to make better decisions for myself?
When I was 30, I felt like I was in a fog, a constant fog. And I don't remember what I was at Harold Washington taking some classes, and they had a health fair, and I saw the mental health table. And now, mind you, I lost my mom at 10, going on 11. And when something that traumatic and tragic happens to a family, especially us, because you got to remember this was 90, 91. I think the adults try to just do the best they can. And they think that sometimes just picking up and trying to continue life on as it was is the best thing to do. But life isn't like it was anymore, right? Someone's missing. So everything has changed. And I just feel like my dad did the best he could with what he was offered. My father is 18 years older than my mother. I'm sure he never in a million years imagined that she would die before him. So I think he just tried to pick up the pieces the best he could. He got married when I was 13, and my stepmother and I had a terrible relationship. Terrible. Like, it was terrible. Because she's trying to raise a kid that's really already been raised very different from how she raised her own daughters. So when I started going to therapy, I was introduced to the term arrested development. So when something traumatic happens in someone's life, their emotional development halts. It stops. We know a lot of grown people out here that still act like teenagers, right? So there's been something traumatic that has caused them to stop developing emotionally. And I had to realize that's what happened to me. And I can't blame anyone. And I got to face it and deal with it. And I've always forgiven my dad. Like, I never really felt that there was bad blood or that I resented him. I'll say for a brief period, I probably did resent him for a lot of things, especially when when I was having a bad relationship with my stepmom. But because of his background, you need a woman to raise a girl. So he felt like the right thing to do for me was to go get married. My mother was a United Methodist minister. His wife was very involved with the church. So I think he tried to do the best he could to try to align those things. And it just didn't work. And now he's caught in the middle between his wife and his daughter. So a lot, like, I could go on and on about our whole household dynamic, but to say, once I was able to realize that it was just really everybody reacting to what happened and trying to find the best way out of it. And I didn't resent him once that happened. And I began to just really realize, like, it was reasons that these things happen. And he just did the best he could with what knowledge and experience that he had.
That's real interesting, because Terrell and I had this conversation like 1,000 times when it comes to, I'm always on the side of, our parents do their best with what they only know so much. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
Right.
We have to remember, I know my mom had me when she was really young. She was 17. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of decisions that she made, I never fought, or even my father, he was 19. So it's like, I look back at them, they were young people, you know what I'm saying? So with what they knew, with the limited knowledge that they had at that point, they made decisions. And we always have to remember, people's decisions, especially our parents, are based on, or should be based on, our best interests. So if they believe that decision was in your best interest, it may have been totally wrong, but it came from a place of love. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You have to, and once we remember that, it took me a long time to get over, my dad being who he was to me.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It wasn't abusive or nothing like that. He just wasn't never there. So he ran the streets, was on drugs and all that type of stuff. But me and Pop's cool right now because I got to a point it had to be in my 30s. I know it was in my 30s that I reached a point and said, you know what? He did the best he could. He didn't know. How can I ask him for something that nobody ever gave him?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it speaks value. Again, it's like some of the conversations Real and I have both on the podcast and off, and it seems like it's a theme, right? Because it's always, and I'm glad that you've added language to some of the things that I've tried to articulate, the arrested development, right? So now I'm going to go down the rabbit hole about it, right? Because I only know Arrested Development from the group, right? Love the songs, but didn't really know that it was like, it is really a thing, right? And we always talk about when we see certain people, especially people in our family, and we have a connection with them, and we're like, something happened. Something happened where they just stopped developing, they stopped growing, and we don't know. We can't add. We can't give it language. It's like once you give something language, it gives it meaning, and you can change it at that point. Until then, it's always going to be this kind of abstract thing in the air, right? And so that's what therapy helps a lot of people do. It helps you give language to the way that you're feeling, because a lot of times when we talk about our feelings, you can't explain it. You're like, I just feel this way, but I don't have the words to say what it is that I'm feeling. And once you get those words, it gives it meaning, and you can begin to change that about who you are. Because Terrell's point, we had a conversation about changing. At some point, you got to accept the fact that this is you. You're an adult. You can't keep blaming your daddy, your mama, and all these other folks for what they did to you in the past. Either you're going to change it and be somebody different and be successful for whatever that means for you, or you're going to sit and soak in it. Right. And so it's up to you to make those changes. So I definitely appreciate you giving me the language for that. Now it's going to be a new term for me using that. The other thing I want to say is I absolutely appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and giving and providing context to a girl's way in Chicago. Right. And in big cities, in spaces where they just don't know, and where they're forced to grow up quicker than they should. I really appreciate you being.
It's sorry, but
no, go ahead.
The R. Kelly's of the world, know, everybody, it was a very hot button topic, and predators know how to seek their prey. And a lot of those guys out here who, were dating, young girls as myself, they sought that out because they have too much accountability with women their age, right? Because the younger girls are naive and they can be easily influenced, and they just don't know much. So I just want from all of this, like I feel like I've had a lot of pain in my life, and I want people to learn from my pain, and not just overall, but just if I can provide some type of insight into things and help someone change their mind, even if it's just one person, I just want dads to be more aware of the emotional and mental connections that they have with their girls, not so much just being a provider, right? Be a protector by teaching her how to protect herself. Be a protector by making her Teflon. So when they shooting all of these compliments and attention and all of that stuff at her, that necessarily don't mean just because you bought her some Gucci shoes, some dude because somebody out there got more money. So that's not it. And actually, material gifts you constantly throwing on your daughter is probably the worst thing you can do, because she'll leave her household with a level of entitlement and go out here in this world thinking that that's what she's supposed to expect. But he who holds the gold makes the rules. So that's a whole nother level of all of that. But just arming them with the confidence and the esteem and knowing that they will be heard and listened to, and that their opinions and their thoughts matter. That's it.
And that was going to be my question. It was like, what is the one thing you'd like to you like for people to get from you sharing this and And I definitely got a whole lot from that. I'll be running this back a couple of times. So I appreciate it. Rel, you got any more questions? If not, man, you can take us out of here, bro.
Yo, Robbie, thank you for bringing the emotion, bringing the truth. We actually needed that transparency. When he told me that, you want to come on, I'm like, bet. I just know that from a woman's perspective, daughter's perspective, it could reach a lot of fathers out there. So we just want to say to the fathers out there with daughters, come away from this podcast, this episode, with a few other rules, if you will, that'll make the daughter's life a lot more easier, or easier. So fathers, date your daughter. You know what I'm saying? Be her first love. Talk to her, hold her, hug her. Don't just settle for financial support. Go beyond that financial support. Be there for her emotionally. Be there for her mentally. Besides being physically there for her. Some of y'all be there physically, Negroes.
Facts. Right.
As Robbie said, listen. She said it several times because we have to get that as men. We have to get that in our head, that we have to listen. You have to tell us things like that several times for us to get it. Know these things, man. Know who is your daughter. Know whose your daughter is. Take care of her. Be the man of her life. Be that heart. Don't be afraid to be her friend. Talk to her. Yes. Gossip with her. Do things that her little girlfriends do, man. And I think with that being said, man, we can all become better fathers with daughters. We love our daughters. We raising those little princesses to be queens of the world. So we have to raise them right, but we have to start with a king mindset. So that's it, man. Thank you, Robbie. We love you.
Thank you, Robbie.
I love you guys too, man. This is awesome what you're doing, and man, just keep doing it, man.
Absolutely, we will. Yep. So thank you guys for joining. Robbie, I'll let you know when we post it. It'll be, I'm gonna put it on Facebook, but I'll definitely let you know and share it with you.
All right. I'll tag it, put it on my link tree and all that good stuff.
All that good
Shameless
stuff.
Plug real quick.
Yeah.
At Arlie Beauty on Instagram and Facebook.
Right. No.
Check me out.
Yeah, absolutely. Check out. Yeah, look at her hair now. It's laid. She at the crib, laid up now.
You guys have a beautiful and healthy holiday, man.
You do the same, Robbie.
All right. Thanks.
Yep.
Bye.
Peace.
Peace.